And producing felt like the next natural step for whatever reason. And I think it was a couple of things at the same time, but primarily it was I wanted to provide a space for the kinds of movies that I love, and work with filmmakers that I love. We were at Fantastic Fest, which is this incredible genre film festival in Austin, Texas, that is about to start in a couple of weeks. We were seating for a film. Cargill knew that we had this production company and that we were into genre films, and he leaned over and he was like, "Hey, I've got this script about Ted Bundy that is largely based on transcripts. It's these interviews with him and this FBI profile, Bill Hagmaier. It's built on these conversations between these two men." And that was so compelling, was just thrilling. And it was one of those reads that, you know, not a lot physically is happening, but you can't stop reading it. And it kind of chills you to your core.
My first thought was like, a Bundy movie, you know, and me, that doesn't, like, what? No, but it didn't seem like a natural fit. And I have to say that kind of intrigued me. And then I, you know, obviously was a fan of Elijah's, and I knew about SpectraVision. I had some friends that had meetings with them and said they were great people. And so I was intrigued, and I read the script, and as Elijah said, it was great. It was, you know, it's so simple, and it's based on these actual conversations that took place between the two of them, but it was just such a smooth read. And I right away had a take, and I was like, oh, like, this makes me think of things. It makes me, you know, come up with images and concepts. And so I thought, well, you know, I'll just go in and I'll pitch, and either they like it or they don't, you know, and they liked it.
The role of Bill is a uniquely challenging, interesting role, particularly because he's not super emotionally available. So the challenge there is to try and create a journey, you know, throughout the course of the film. And I was excited about that.
I wanted to show his emotional turmoil, both through his interactions with Bundy in the room, you know, their kind of swordplay that they engage in, but then also the use of the interstitials, the montage stuff, that, you know, that to me is where we're able to kind of like not only explore what's going on in the outside world outside of the prison, but like also what's going on emotionally for Bill. And I felt like we could say so much more about what Bundy is making him think of just by showing him following a woman on the street. You know, he's suddenly looking at women differently and looking at, you know, understanding their fears differently, you know, and what it's like for them to literally just walk down the street differently. Like, he just needs to connect with his wife, and he can't. And that to me was really symbolic of, like, he's never going to be able to articulate to anyone really what it was like that he went through with Ted Bundy. They're both performing for each other. So there's these, you know, there's Luke and Elijah performing, and then there's Bill and Ted performing, you know, and then there's the real feelings that they really have coming out. So there's all these different layers. And when you get to start coupling that with, like, okay, this scene is about how Bill is really searching for Bundy and he can't find him. And then, you know, when I realized that, I was like, oh, well, that's easy. Then we're looking under Bill's arm, and we're looking, you know, we don't see Bundy's whole face, and his eyes are not lit very well. You know, it all starts to, I mean, it honestly is stuff I learned at AFI, and, you know, about just how the cinematic language, the camera language, and the lighting language, to me, it was about having it represent, you know, where Bill and Ted were and where their relationship was, you know. So as their relationship progressed, right, from the first, I think it's 4 or 5 times that we see them in the room, as that progresses, then, you know, the camera language changes because their relationship is changing. This is going to be very painful for basically any woman watching this. You know, what is the statistics are like 1 out of every 3 women has been, you know, a victim of sexual assault. So, you know, it's the women that are going to be made to be very uncomfortable listening to this. And I felt like the onus was really on them to, like, feel the feelings of, like, that could be me, that could be happening to me, you know. Like, we're the ones that are trained when we go off to college to buy mace and keep, you know, learn how to have our keys stuck between our fingers so we can stab somebody as we walk to our car at night, you know. And so I suddenly thought, well, what if Bill is the surrogate for the women in the audience? What if he gets to be the representation of, like, how painful it is to have to hear what this fucking asshole did to these women, you know? And so that was my idea. And my, you know, my ask of Elijah was like, I'm going to have you memorize the monologue, but you're going to be like hysterically sobbing. And he was like, what? But because he is a consummate professional, he was like, okay, Amber, I'll try that. And I said, look, it might be a mistake. Like if it ends up on the editing room floor, like I'll buy you a nice bottle of wine as an apology, you know, but just can we, and because Elijah is the best, he was like, all right, you know, and it was, I think it was our second day of filming that we did that scene, and he just fucking, you know, knocks it out of the park. He's like sobbing and crying, and I was like, yes. It's deconstructing what it is, you know, we're not only listening to the awfulness of it and the gore of it, and in some senses there's a titillation, you know, behind that, but it's deconstructing it. It's I guess it was my concept of like being sort of Brechtian about it, you know, we're stepping back from it, we're allowing Bill, to, you know, to have the emotions for us, and it enables us to kind of like step back, and I say us as an audience, but I also mean us as women to sort of be like, all right, this is not just all on me to feel the feelings of what it's like to hear this.
And you choose to zoom in on this PA in the background, and you drop the audio out. She looks right into the camera at the very end, and it's like you're indicting us.
Yeah. Dude, that's it.
Talk about that.
That's
I'm indicting all of us, you know, like I mean, it started out quite simply from a like, well, what about the woman in the room? What about this 18-year-old, you know, assistant of Dobson, whose job it is to follow him around as carry his briefcase and get his lunch? Like, what's she thinking when she has to sit there listening to that? She's the one who, you know, when she was in college just a couple of years ago, was actually scared of Bundy, you know, and triple locking her door at night, you know? And so I just was kind of like, to me, it's really not more complicated than I was just like, why are we not pointing the camera at her? You know, like this is 50% her story in a sense, you know, like the stories of Bundy's crimes are not only about him, they're also about the victim. Like it happened to them. They know the other side of it, you know, and they don't get to speak for themselves. You know, he silenced them. So I felt like in as much as I could, I wanted to give the victims a voice without them having a voice. My objective was not to create empathy. It just, you know, if it happens, it happens. But I certainly didn't feel an obligation to, you know, make the audience like him or make the audience feel anything for him. It was really just an obligation to get to, like, I mean, I know I'm being repetitive here, but just to get to the truth, you know, and because we have these, you know, the conversations were quite often verbatim, you know, real conversations that Bill and Bundy had, you know, we have these recordings that we're listening to. I know these conversations really took place. And so it was about trying to find, why did he say that? What does he want? What is his fear underneath it? And to me, underneath everything that Bundy's doing is fear and anxiety and insecurity. And so, you know, it might be just that you were responding to that you saw this person who's actually quite sad,